When Joe Pulizzi launched The Tilt in 2021, he already had a pretty good idea of how to build a successful media company. Back in 2017, he had sold his previous media startup, the Content Marketing Institute, to one of the world's largest event conglomerates. Joe ran The Tilt with a very similar playbook, first starting with a weekly newsletter and then expanding into an in-person conference called the Content Entrepreneur Expo, or CEX. The venture was so successful that he sold it to Lulu Press in 2023. In our interview, Joe talked about his newsletter growth strategy, what it takes to put on a successful conference, and why he prefers the term content entrepreneur instead of creator. Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. If you want to listen to an audio version of this show, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcasts. Before we jump into the interview, I want to talk about how I monetize this show. As you've probably noticed, it doesn't carry any advertising. Instead, it relies entirely on paid subscriptions. A subscription gets you three main benefits. First, it allows you to book a half-hour introductory call with me. It's a great way to pick my brain about challenges you're facing in your own content business. Second, you're able to submit questions to my monthly Q&A series, and I'll answer them on this very show. And finally, a subscription gets you access to premium podcast episodes where I go even deeper on how the world's most successful media entrepreneurs grow their content businesses. Once you subscribe, you're given a custom feed that you can plug into your podcast player of choice. Subscribe at simonowens.substack.com. That's simonowens.substack.com, or just Google the words Simon Owens and newsletter. Okay, let's jump into my interview with Joe. Hey, Joe, thanks for joining me.
Simon, good to be here.
So I've actually had you on the podcast before, and during that episode, you talked about your previous company, the Content Marketing Institute, and how you built that and how you sold it. And I don't want to rehash all of that today because I want to talk about what you built after that, but I just want to catch everybody up to speed who, maybe didn't see that episode. So let's just do a quick speed run through that. So when did you launch the Content Marketing Institute?
So in 2007, I left my job. I was in B2B publishing at Penton Media, started what ultimately became Content Marketing Institute in April of 2007. The base was a blogging platform. We focused on building this little mini media company for marketing professionals that didn't understand how to do anything with content. And then Google came along and social media, and we hit right at the right time. And then built out the web presence, contentmarketinginstitute.com, built the big event, Content Marketing World, which was really what ended up being of most value when we sold the company, and we did a magazine chief content officer, and we did all that through 2015. We started the sales process in 15, sold in 16 to UBM, now Informa. I stayed on with CMI until 2017 and took my big sabbatical year in 18, one of the best years of my life. I highly recommend it. And then, then we could talk about some other stuff, but started in on this creator economy thing and this, what I would call a content entrepreneur thing in 2000, 2001.
Well, we're going to talk about your terminology of creator and content entrepreneur, but you were one of the earliest people to use the term content marketing, because before then it was considered brand publishing, and it was only, you were there very early on, this idea that companies, whether they were media or usually non-media companies, could actually learn something from media companies and create organic, high-quality content and use that as a way to bring in inbound marketing where they could own their audience, where they wouldn't have to spend on advertising and more traditional marketing routes. You were one of the early kind of advocates for that.
I was totally lucky to fall into, when I started working at Penton Media in 2000, they put me in the custom media group, which was, brand publishing, custom publishing, whatever you want to call it at the time. And it was just wow, if I was marketing today, I don't want to interrupt people through advertising. I would really like to tell stories, build an audience, and then from that, the loyal, trusted audience, they go and buy my stuff. That's essentially content marketing. Where I sort of maybe found the whole, what the opportunity in content marketing, what people sort of call it now, or a lot of people call it now, was I was doing a lot of sales calls at Penton, trying to sell custom magazines and custom newsletters and webinar programs and such. And I would try out different terms. I would try out, hey, are you doing any brand publishing? Are you doing any custom publishing? Are you doing any custom media? And marketers didn't care about any of that, especially when you call it publishing. They're like, we don't do publishing. I'm in marketing. But then a couple times, Simon, I would go into these calls and I say, "Are you doing any content marketing?" Now they didn't know what content marketing was. It was just sort of a term I put on them, but they're like, content marketing, I think we do. And they're like, oh, marketing. And that's when I got, marketers, I'm a marketer. I can say this. We're simple people, call it, search marketing, social media marketing, direct marketing. It has to have something marketing. So we simplified it. And that was really sort of what I call a content tilt, our differentiation. So we were able to break through a lot of that clutter and have a name and create the institute and go from there.
And then was the main form of monetization the conference?
So when we started, when I started, it was consulting, and then I'm like, well, this business, I don't enjoy consulting. It's not something that we can grow quickly. So what I want to really build this media property. So we started as basically web advertising. We created like benefactor packages. And basically it was a fancy term for we're going to put your sponsorship on our email newsletters and we're going to put them on our website. And so that sort of kickstarted the company. But when we launched Content Marketing World in September of 2011, it just took off. The hope was, can we get 100 to 150 marketers to come to Cleveland, Ohio in September of 2011? And luckily we had 660 marketers show up. It was almost $1 million event the first year. It went on to become a $6 million plus event before we sold it. And yeah, that was $6 million was the total value of that event. And then when we sold, we were almost a $10 million company. So of course, 60%, most of the profit came from the event itself. And I love events.
And then the sponsors for that were like marketing tech and other kinds of marketing vendors.
Absolutely. Marketing automation, email marketing, anything that new coming along the path. We obviously had some custom content agencies that were there as well. But along with this, that's really when marketing automation as a category took off. So our big, Eloqua and Marketo were our big players, and Adobe came along. And so about 20, of the revenue set, about 25 to 30% were sponsorship revenues, and then the rest were registration revenues. It's one of the, if you bought the all access package as an attendee, you'd spend $2,200 to go to the event. So it was pricey.
And you sold that in 2017, you said, to
16,
and it's to the company that's now called Informa, which is a huge events company, right? Yeah,
that is correct. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So you stayed on there, but then you left at a certain point, and you had like a non-compete for some number of years, right? And
that's correct.
So you used that opportunity to continue doing your podcast, this old marketing, and then you also wrote a book during that time.
Yeah, that's what I enjoy doing mostly, and where I spend most of my time is I've written 8 books over that time period, Epic Content Marketing and Content Inc. And so I kept writing, and I kept doing my own newsletter. And until up to 2020, when I was found out about this whole creator economy thing, and I thought it was it was a renaming of some of the stuff we'd done before. I'm like, these are just media companies, and they don't really know how to monetize themselves. And there's content creators everywhere, and I'm like, wow, this seems like somewhere I'd want to get involved in.
Yeah, and so that's where we left off in our last interview, is like you had just published your book, your non-compete was on the verge of expiring basically, which would allow you to start another company, and so you ended up launching this company called The Tilt. I guess to start with, flesh it out. What was the actual idea, the initial idea for The Tilt?
So the initial idea for The Tilt was instead of the base that we started Content Marketing Institute being a blog, I'm like, well, let's just go right to an e-newsletter. Let's go right to the thing that we have the most control over. And that's the best model in my opinion. So we created an e-newsletter for content creators. There was a lot of information for content creators out there, still is today, as you know. It's a very crowded area, but I didn't think that enough people were talking about the business of content. And that's why I found your podcast. I'm like, oh my God, here's a guy that's talking about the business of content. That's what we're trying to talk about. And so, yes, did we talk about getting found in social media and audience building and some things like that? Sure. But really what I wanted to talk about was structure, revenue generation, audience development that leads to real revenue, exit planning, legal operations, those types of things. So that's what we tended to focus on more with the Tilt. So that launched in early 21. We launched the Tilt newsletter. Now we've got, I think, almost 35,000 subscribers to the Tilt. So we've done fairly well, mostly organic. And then that, as part of that, I'm like, well, okay, you start the base, you build the audience, and then you launch the event. It's natural. So we launched CEX as part of that later in the year as an event for content creators.
So, like, obviously it's a slightly different niche than what you're doing before, but it's definitely adjacent. Why did you decide you wanted to stay in this niche? Because, like, sometimes I fantasize about selling what, my current operations now, although it would be hard since it's named after me. I would need to rename it and make it a little bit more scalable before I would sell it. But sometimes I do fantasize about that. And then what would I do next? And it would be something in like a completely different niche, like clean energy or green tech or something like that. Like I definitely wouldn't start a new company that's in the niche that I'm in now. Why did you decide that you wanted to do that?
Well, I will be completely honest with you, Simon. If COVID didn't happen, I would have never done it. I honestly, I don't want to say bored because I don't believe in the B word, but I just started to spend a lot of my time because 2020 was the year my wife and I were going to travel the globe. We had it all set up. We had the trip set up. I was not even going to be in Cleveland, Ohio to do any of this. And of course, as we know, that stopped. I started to read things on the creator economy and tokenization and new business models or whatever. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And then somebody said, maybe you should republish Content Inc. So I started to write around that, do case studies. And it's sort of like, it brought me back into the industry, if you will. And then I said, well, as long as I'm going to write a book and do this, I should just start the business. Now, in hindsight, I probably would have never formalized the business because I love this area. I love content creators. I love working with content entrepreneurs. I've done that for the last 20 years. I will continue to do it all my life, but I didn't want to necessarily go into operations again. It just happened, which as we get further along in the story, we could say it had a happy ending and I got out of operations, which is what I wanted. But yeah, so if I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't. But the good news is that we created something valuable. We created a great community. I love this community. I'm glad I'm a part of it, but I'm also glad I'm not working on day-to-day operations anymore.
Yeah. And you use this term a lot, content entrepreneur versus creator. And like you look at like other things in the creator economy space, like Colin and Samir and stuff like that, they use the term creator more often. Why did you settle on content entrepreneur as more just, I'm guessing it was like you felt it was a more descriptive term.
I have a problem, Simon, with content creator because my mom is a content creator. She creates content on Facebook. She's a content creator. You know content creators. And I wanted something that differentiated somebody just creating content, which most people do on social media or whatever as a hobby or just for fun, versus those people trying to make a business out of it. They're trying to become financially free, independent by, building an audience first and then launching products and services from that audience. I believe that's a content entrepreneur. So I was like, what do you call that? Whatever. So I just started using the term content entrepreneur. I ran it by the community. The community loved it. We were publishing a book called The Content Entrepreneur in a couple months. So that just feels better. So when I say to my community, content entrepreneur, they know exactly what I mean. This is somebody that is an entrepreneur that launched this. This is a full-time gig. It's not a hobby. And so I've been pushing it out as much as possible because when you say content creator, I don't know if you mean for hobbyist content creator or business content creator.
Yeah. And so, when you launched the Content Marketing Institute or the blog that became it, I'm assuming it was just like a scrappy blog with just you, running that, during your free time. This time you had a little bit more capital experience.
Yep.
I mean, I remember when the Tilt launched, like you had actual writers, like you had maybe it was a small staff, but you had some sort of staffing behind it. What was the approach there?
Yeah, we started with a staff of 4. I basically had a full-time editor, Ann Ginn, who still runs the newsletter today. Laura Kozak, who basically runs all web operations with Dave Anthony. Mark Maxheimer came in to help with sponsorships and partnerships. So it was great because I could be me. I could do the speaking, I could do my writing, I could be Joe Pulizzi, and then they could really run the business, which was awesome. And they've done a great job with it.
And they're like, so talk about like because the format has been somewhat the same for the entirety of it. Like you start with some kind of like more kind of practical advice at the top, but then I think you actually do like an interview with an actual content entrepreneur, and then you have like a link roundup at the bottom. How did you kind of like settle on that as the format?
It's interesting. We made the decision, much like Morning Brew is a good example, right? That all the content would be encapsulated inside the newsletter. I wanted to create something where they didn't have to click to get anything, which is a really, really different model, because the Content Marketing Institute model was absolutely, here's the abstract, you have to click. We focused so much on getting people to the website. Search engine optimization was number one, everything. We had a rolling list of 50 keywords. We were always on it. Here it was, we didn't really look at search engine optimization, only for acquisition is really all we're looking for, because our current customers were just hopefully opening the newsletter, and that's all we were doing. So the first part was something how-to, something strategic, generally 400 or 500 words. If it went longer, we said you can click to read the full article or whatever. And then we'd have some kind of a case study. Content Entrepreneur Spotlight, whether that be on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or a newsletter. But the whole goal with that is to focus on a content entrepreneur, not a hobbyist. And we really focus on the time to first dollar, and the time to some goal that they had. Is it a time to $100,000? It was a time to 100,000 subscribers. What was it? So we wanted to make sure, because we talk a lot about how long it takes to build a sustainable model, where a lot of people think, oh, content creator, it can happen in months. No, it doesn't. It happens in years. It takes a long time. This is very hard to do. And we wanted to get it out to people that say, no, you have to really work at this. And then, yes, so then at the end, we'd have our, here's Joe and Robert's podcast on this, or here's a really new, great research project. Those types of things at the end. But that model's pretty much stayed the same for the last 3 years.
Yeah. And so the top part, like, it's like kind of a piece of advice that's like kind of evergreen. Was that kind of an SEO play you were saying?
No SEO play at all. The whole goal was to give them something unique and something they could work with, something that they could sink their teeth into, that they did not have to go to our website to get. So that was, and I'm a big believer in that from any newsletter. Like, if you're just going to repack, there is value in curation and there's value in repackaging. I totally get it. But that was not our goal. Our goal was that these content entrepreneurs are really busy. 2 times a week, we're going to send them something that they can get through in 10 minutes. And we give them basically, and as part of that, I forgot to mention, is a whole news section where, here's things that'll help you build audience. Here's 3 things that'll help you build revenue. And they're sort of newsy items. And the thought was, if you are the busy content entrepreneur, you'd only need this newsletter. Like, you've been in that newsletter dozens of times with things that we find fascinating. So we want to say, great, there's all things out there. We have a team of people that are going to put this together for you. So you just have to open the tilt and we'll give you everything you need. And
you mentioned that you've grown to 30,000. Outside of like the organic things, what have been kind of the other growth levers? Because I've seen I'll randomly be reading like a Semaphore Media newsletter or something like that, and I'll see a plug for the Tilt. So it's obvious that someone on your organization is aggressive in building relationships with other media companies so that you could trade recommendations and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So our number one and number two, number one are just partnerships. So we do partnerships we probably have over 100 partnerships where we will do trades, and we'll say, look, would you promote the Tilt to your audience? And then we'll vice versa. If it makes sense, we'll promote your newsletter or whatever your offer is. We try to be very proactive with telling our audience that we're doing that. So that's been number one from a growth. And also we're part of the ConvertKit creator network. So we've been using ConvertKit as our email marketing platform forever. And their internal network recommendation engine has worked really, really, really well for us. And I know Beehive has one as well, and you could say Substack has one. But what happens is you just work with other creators and say, hey, you're part of the same email network as us, ConvertKit, and basically you negotiate recommendations, and you can do it paid or free. Right now we're just on the free model, and we just hope people organically recommend us, and that's worked also very, very well.
Have you done any paid acquisition? I know you've done paid acquisition for the conference. Have you done any for the newsletter?
We have done the paid version of the ConvertKit recommendation engine, and it works really well, but we just decided to use our budget to promote the event instead of the newsletter.
And that's like Spark Loops, where you basically set up cost per conversion so that they get a customized link and they put the recommendation in their newsletter, and every time someone clicks on that link and signs up for their newsletter, that you pay like some set amount, like $3 or something like that per conversion.
Absolutely. It's something like that. Whatever you say, I will pay 75 cents for each one. It's that kind of thing. And then the way it works is now with ConvertKit, if you go ahead and subscribe, like through the subscription process of wherever you're at, you will then see along that process a recommendation engine come up and say, oh, you liked Saturday Solopreneur from Justin Welsh. You may like the Tilt. So that's kind of how it works.
Yeah. I mean, Substack really pioneered that. It's interesting now that a lot of other networks are starting to copy that.
I didn't believe, Simon, I got to tell you, I didn't believe in it. Like, I really didn't think it would be significant until I saw the numbers. And then now I'm like, oh my God, I can see that the future of acquisition could revolve around a creator network. And if you're really good with building relationships with other content creators in your network, you can do very well.
It's basically a new iteration of the blog roll, because like I remember when blog rolls were like a great discovery tool for other blogs, and I know like some blogs would actually like set up blog roll swaps and stuff like that.
It's so crazy. It's all coming around again. We're doing the same things.
And so you eventually launched this conference, CEX. I went to the first one. I think it was outside of Phoenix. Excellent conference. So what was I'm guessing that was always the plan, was to launch the newsletter first and then a conference on top of that.
That was the plan. We probably launched that first year event a little bit too soon, and we launched it at a time when the economy and tokenization. So a lot of our content was around tokenization, because I believed that content entrepreneurs could use tokens as part of their media business model and be successful. Well, that thing went down the chute. Yeah. Really, as you know, really quickly.
I remember there were a lot of I was there. There were a lot of crypto people at that conference, and I remember sitting across from them where they were trying to explain their business models to me, and I was like, how are you getting paid for giving me free crypto? I don't get it. It was like this. It felt like this like Ponzi scheme or something like that.
Let's put it this way. I learned a lot during that era. Now, first of all, I still believe in tokenization. Like I really do. I believe that there is something to that in the business model of media companies and for content entrepreneurs. I do not believe it's there yet. So we were just really, really early. And so a lot of the content from that first CEX event went into token. Like, we had a whole track on it and whatever, and tokens. So in 22, everything really shifted, and we just went more into, hey, don't rely on social media as the center of your business model. And we actually wrote that in a life. If you go to cex.events, you will see that we say, hey, how do you build your content business without relying on social media? So we really started to go that direction. That's why we talk about email so much. But so the first year event was in Phoenix, and then we've had the last two. Well, the second one in Cleveland, Ohio in May. So as much as I love Phoenix, I'm a Cleveland guy, so we want to support locally as much as we can.
Yeah, I'm good friends with Alexis Grant, who I know has been a speaker there. And that first year, I was like, "Oh, are you going?" And she's like, "Nah, too much crypto stuff."
I know it was. We were actually. It's interesting, you know. We've talked before about you kind of finding your content niche and whatever. I really felt our differentiation was around that, but there wasn't the structure in the industry, just couldn't support it. And of course, all the negativity, like we went from getting a lot of subscribers that way, talking about that type of content, to crickets. We're like, okay, well, that's good. I mean, I've been there before. I remember internet when we were around. I was around Penton when internet world just was at the top of the mountain and then just crashed. So it's like, okay, I've been here before. We've got to pivot, and we really pivot toward this business thing, and it's worked really.
I mean,
well.
to be fair, it wasn't so much a pivot as just like you kind of phased that part out, because I went to that. Most of it wasn't about crypto. It just had that kind of that was like a part of the programming, but wasn't like all of it or anything.
That's true. And well, the good part about it is that when we launched it, I have launched the CEX Never Ending Ticket token as part of it. And that community we have 75 people in that community. We meet every month. It's still alive and well. They basically paid a premium the first year and they get the Never Ending Ticket. So they get a free ticket every year. And that's worked really well because I think from a recommendation standpoint, we have our loyal group of people and they recommend CEX to everybody. It's like, oh, you got to come, you got to be part of it. They volunteer. So it wasn't all bad. It worked out really well. We got to figure it out. And that, we still have our whole, token thing. You can go on OpenSea and see it. You can see the number of holders. It's still a thing, but we just don't educate on it anymore.
Yeah. So I'm not much of a conference guy because I'm kind of an introvert and I have a hard time, really, opening up and meeting people and getting the maximum amount out of a conference. But like the thing that like always impressed me during that CEX I went to is like how much you build networking into the programming. Like it is session, then immediately go to a networking thing, then the session, and then immediately go to a networking thing. Like I've never been to a conference that like did that much to try to bring people into common rooms together to try to drive them to networking, whereas like in a lot of other conference, like the networking, you're kind of expected to like do that on your own and as like an ancillary thing, and there might be like a happy hour, but it isn't like built in throughout the entire day. What was that something you learned from running the Content Marketing Institute, or like what was the...
Absolutely. Thank you for noticing, by the way, because it's really important to us. We're very proud of our educational tracks. I will put the speakers at Content Entrepreneur Expo against anyone. I think that we have the best speakers, the best lineup of anybody. But that is not the number one reason why people come. People come, number one, for networking, to meet people that are dealing with the same challenges as them. And I found that early days in content marketing world where, yeah, of course, I mean, people don't go to all the sessions. They go in and out, whatever. But what I see going on is there's a meeting there. There's a group meeting here. Jay Klaus is taking his whole community out to dinner. It's the face-to-face interaction with people that are important to you, relationships you're building to help you build your business model. So knowing that, it's like, great, we will have a really good breakfast for you. We want you to sit or stand around a table with people and meet those people and do it in a way that feels okay. And that's what's interesting too. To your point, what I found out is a lot of content entrepreneurs are introvert. They're doing their podcast thing. They're doing their writing thing. They work alone. They don't talk to a lot of people. It's like, this is a big deal. So we have to make sure that we put them in situations that are easy for them to talk to other people. And the number one thing, like if you're saying, like, what is the outcome? I want people to spend money with us. Sure. I want the business model to work. But the outcome is for them to meet one or two people that can help them build their business. And so we see a lot of partnerships back. We see people author books together. We've seen people build businesses together from going to CEX. Those are the types of things that I know, hey, now I know it's working. Because, I mean, I just believe as a content creator, as a content entrepreneur, you have to be around other people going through the same challenges. We got to get out of our silos sometimes because that's when the business model blossoms. It's just hard to see that when you're working on the business every day.
Yeah. So you had this like separate room that was like, if I remember correctly, was like the size of gymnasium, and you always like were had every single networking session throughout the day. You always made sure there were snacks there, coffee there, and then lots of tables. And then you also had all the vendors in the center. So you were like sending people to the vendor area. So there was like a lot of synergies that were happening there.
And the good news is we're going to do the same thing this year. You put the food and the drink and like the opening reception and all those are in that gathering place. Make it very familiar, easy for them to get to. Don't make it complicated. And it's worked really, really well. We've used that for, over 10 years now, and that model works really well.
Yeah, and I'm sure like a lot of conference organizers are worried about like the food budget getting out of hand or something like that. But, what was that like? What's that kind of consideration that you sort of are like providing stuff? It's not like you're like giving surf and turf or anything like that, but it is like you are kind of providing service and food throughout the day versus just like one meal or something like that.
I mean, I go to a lot of events a year. I go to 20 to 30 or more events a year, and we spend more on F&B, and it hurts the budget. I'll be honest with you. It's one of our biggest line items. We did for our lunch last year on the last day, we did a warm meal of home cooked Cleveland. We had sauerkraut, we had kielbasa on there, we had pierogi. Like, we had some things to show them a little bit of Cleveland. It was very expensive. I don't know a lot of events that would do that. They like to, and I get it. We do a box lunch one day. That works well, but we like to mix it up a little bit. It is pricey. So that's where you have to make sure that you get the right number of sponsors, the right number of people at the event, so you can spend it. And I'm willing, at early days of an event like this, I've always been willing to spend more and have the profit margin suffer, for knowing that in the future it will pay off.
And then in terms of sponsors, like obviously there are a number of like creator economy type focused companies out there, but then I'm guessing also like all those marketing companies that the relationships you had at the Content Marketing Institute, like a lot of those are still interested in meeting content entrepreneurs, because those content entrepreneurs are doing all sorts of stuff relating to marketing, and there's a lot of like crossover between, like, I noticed a lot of creator economy and media type newsletters and podcasts have marketing tech advertisers. So there's some crossover between those two things, right?
There's a little bit of crossover. A lot of our audience are marketers, so they're content entrepreneurs in the marketing space. So there's a little bit of crossover. It's different from a sponsorship standpoint, because when you're a content marketing world, if somebody is sponsoring that event, they're selling to enterprises. They want to sell a multiple seat deal. You're not going to get that at CEX. You're going to sell to an individual. So a lot of like the agencies that are there, they want to work and set up your podcast. They want to do your podcast back and forth. They want to do all the editing, whatever. It's smaller agencies versus a large agency that might say, I want to do your monthly custom magazine that's going to cost you $5 million. It is a much different proposition. So I would say a very little bit of overlap. We get more overlap in the attendees because the speakers at an event like Content Marketing World, a lot of those are they're content entrepreneurs, so that they end up coming to CEX for the education and the networking. So that there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah. And so you within the last year or so, I think you sold the company. So
Yes.
So to Lulu Press.
That is correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
which I
Lulu. Go ahead.
I think I know of it as like a self-publishing platform, but is it do other things, or is that basically what it is?
So basically, if you want to publish your book, you publish it on Lulu, and they're the largest self-publisher out there. So you've got big Amazon, and then you've got, hey, you would like your own data, and you would like to keep your relationships with your customers. You want more money, you try to go with a Lulu, and you integrate it with your website. Basically what happened is, I didn't even know Lulu was getting into the creator economy space. They filled out a form and ended up sponsoring at the first CEX, and I got to know the company. I'm like, this is wonderful, whatever. Well, the next year they became our big sponsor for CEX, and I really got to know Matt Briel, the VP of marketing, and the team over there. And in a side conversation with Matt, he was talking about the fact that they were thinking about launching their own event, because they were really focusing on content creators and content entrepreneurs to be a big part of their new audience they were going after, instead of your traditional fiction author, if you will. And I said, well, you don't have to launch your own event. Why don't you just buy this one? Because I wanted to get out of operations. I wanted to sort of go back and take a back seat. I'd love to still keep hosting CEX. I want to keep writing. I want to keep podcasting, but I don't want to focus on, oh my God, I got to pay everyone's salary and I got to do all those operations. And so we had a nice conversation for about 6 months, and it worked really well, and said, great, you're going after this new audience. And Lulu ended up purchasing the Tilt newsletter and CEX. And I'm sticking around and helping them as a strategic advisor, and I still get to host the event, and I still worked on the agenda this year. And so I do all the things that I get to do, and I don't have those other pesky media responsibilities that I didn't like very much.
And so is their main differentiator is they do print on demand?
Yes, absolutely. So you can print 2 copies or 200 copies. And really what they're trying to push is don't necessarily send all your fans to Amazon. That's what, and I've done that for years, right? I'm a McGraw-Hill and self-publisher, and I would say, great, I'll put it on Amazon. I'll send everybody there, and I'll get $1 a copy, and it'll be great. And then as I'm talking with Lulu, it's like, hey, you could send them. So you've got 250,000 people that follow you on LinkedIn. Why are you going to send them to Amazon where they get all the money and they get all the data? Why don't you send them to your website, have them buy directly from you? The package can come from you. You can set whatever price point you want, and you get all their information. And I'm like, can you do that? Is that a thing? And so as I'm learning more about book publishing, and I've always talked about, I've always been this big believer in don't build your content house on rented land. It's if you build your house on Facebook's property, they can do whatever they want. They can cut you off at any moment. Elon and X could cut you off at any moment. Same with YouTube, whatever. And I didn't think about it with the book publishing process, but now that I'm learning about it, that's why we were on the same page with this whole thing. And they're like, we're trying to teach this to content entrepreneurs so they don't just say, hey, you can give Amazon more money and even more of your data. And so that's what we're really trying to teach with this. And this year we have a publishing track to do a lot of that.
Or does it also do digital products like Gumroad, with you could do ebooks and stuff like that? Or is it just like a physical product type of company?
Yeah, so right now Lulu is focusing on print demand books, and in the future we're going to focus on ebooks and audiobooks. But right now it's basically just trying to talk to the author, content entrepreneur, and say, hey, instead of just automatically uploading your thing to Amazon, let's go ahead, put this on your website, send your fans and your subscribers to your website, set whatever price you want for your book, and take that data, make more money, get that data, take more control over your business model, and go that direction. And so, part of this whole initiative is we're launching a new imprint called Tilt Publishing. And so we're focusing specifically on content entrepreneurs and say, hey, we want to support you. We'll take you, you get it 90% of the way, get your manuscript done. We'll take it the last 10%. We'll get an editor to look at it. We'll do the graphic design. We'll lay the whole thing out. We'll help you market this thing and get you published. And that launches in April. So fingers crossed that we get a lot of content entrepreneurs that say, hey, I don't want to learn how to do all those things and then set it up on my website and sell directly. So we're going to be doing that stuff for them.
So after HubSpot bought The Hustle, The Hustle was generating most of its revenue through advertising. The very moment it was acquired by HubSpot, all the advertising went away because it was purely a content play for promoting, HubSpot's very expensive suite of different software products. Is that the synergy here with Lulu Press? Did it acquire it as a kind of marketing arm for Lulu Press, or is it see it as a form of revenue diversification into other verticals other than print-on-demand publishing?
I think the answer is probably both. I mean, the Tilt and CEX, they haven't changed at all outside of the fact that we're adding a little bit more education for authors to understand that process. But we're still we're still advertising driven newsletter. So we're still selling advertising there. We're still selling sponsorship and registration for CEX. So those things are remaining intact. And then we're like, okay, well, what can we offer uniquely as the Tilt to an audience? And that's where I got excited about the partnership with Lulu, because Simon, I am amazed that you have the smartest people in the world that are focusing on being the leaders in their informational niche and building these mini media companies. And you say, hey, publish a book. And they're like a deer in headlights.
I've gone through the process. It's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And mine was just
I get
ebooks. Mine wasn't even like a print product. Yeah.
Right. And it is. It's more difficult than it has to be. So we're like, look, you do what you do really well. You just create the content and we'll get you the rest of the way. And we've already have a number. I think we have 8 or 9 people in the process already as beta publishers and figuring this thing out. So I'm pretty excited about it. And I guess until I started looking at it, Simon, I'm like, I don't know if there's a market. And then I started to talk to our audience. I'm like, oh, there is a market. There absolutely is.
And is that like a paid service, like a consulting service, or is it like a revenue share type of thing?
It's a very, very basically we'll cover our costs. I mean, the price of it, it's going to be way less than $10,000 to do it. Like where if you go with historically some of these services, you pay a lot of money for this. But we are not, we'll basically say, hey, we just need to cover our costs on our design and our editorial and make sure it's all there. But then we're not taking any royalties. Like there's nothing like that. Like this is your book. This is your property. We're just helping you get this portion of your content business up and running and get it up and going on your website. We just want to see that happen for you.
So you're just selling the services at cost with the idea that where you're really going to make the money is when they sell the product on Lulu, and then Lulu takes its cut of whatever that is, like 10%
That's
or
right.
whatever.
That's exactly right. We love if you can sell 1,000 print copies, and that's great. And then Lulu makes a couple bucks off of that. That's really all we want. And hopefully, fingers crossed that it'll work. And the good news is that they can, like, if let's say a 300-page book, traditional nonfiction book costs you $6 or $7 to produce. I mean, you could set the price at $20 or $25, or you want to do a special 100 run for your VIP community. You say, oh, great, that's going to cost $10 to produce, but I can sell it for $50 or $100 or whatever the case may be.
And then the idea is that if you're doing all this professional editing and production services, that even increases their chance even more of selling more copies, which would benefit Lulu in the long run.
That's exactly right. And the thought is if you say, hey, I mean, you know how many hours, I know how many hours it takes to do this thing and to figure it out and get this thing to fruition. We're like, okay, take the 20, 30, or 40 hours and we'll handle that. We'll do it quicker, we'll more efficiently. We've got professionals doing that. You focus on marketing it. You focus on selling more and more as much as you can, because that's, I guess the dirty little secret is that 95% of book publishing is marketing the book. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. It's almost like when you get a deal, and I've done this with McGraw-Hill, which the business division actually doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. But you figure, oh, great, I remember I got my first deal in 2008 with McGraw-Hill. I'm like, great, I don't have to market it. And then you realize you go to the meeting, and the marketing meeting is where they ask you, how are you going to market the book?
Yeah.
And I'm like, how? I thought you were going to help. It's like, oh, we're going to run it by our sales team, but you're going to sell it. You're going to get on podcasts, and you're going to do all that work. I'm like, okay, thank you.
When did that deal close for the acquisition?
That closed in August of last year, of 23.
Okay, so this will be the first CEX under the new ownership. So that is correct. The CEX is coming up in May, right?
May 5th through 7th in Cleveland.
Yes. So if I were more prepared for this, your staff actually gave me a discount code. I'll make sure to put that in the description that we're
or I could give mine, whatever.
Yeah,
it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all
good.
I
wouldn't mind using my discount, my personal discount.
So go in the show notes, go to Simon's discount, you'll get $100 off. And then, of course, you get to see Simon Owens speak.
Spoiler alert, I will actually be speaking at this conference. But tell me about some of the other stuff that you have planned for it.
So again, we're really focusing on this whole business of content thing. Whether you are a first-timer, you're just getting started, or you're a veteran, we've got beginner and advanced sessions. We've got Latasha James focusing on YouTube. We've got Justin Welsh, Mr. Saturday Solopreneur, coming and stuff. Jay Klaus is coming. Roberto Blake is going to be there. We've got 40 plus speakers on audience building, revenue generation, on publishing activities, social media, on legal and operations and those types of things. And the way we set it up, basically to your point before, You're going to get there. There'll be a networking reception, and then you're going to have a whole load of the best keynotes on the planet. Rafat Ali from Skift is going to be presenting as well. Our final keynote on the first day. And then you'll have networking time. Then you'll go into 4 breakouts, one of 4 breakouts. You can go to any one of them. And then the next day, and then we're going to have, I think we've got an 80s party for all those introverts out there that like the 1980s. We're going to have a good time doing that. So I'm really excited. We're capping it at 500. I think we're going to get there this year. This event works really well at a 400 or 500 person group. I know from like when we got Content Marketing World to 4,000 attendees, it gets a little bit hairy, but I love the networking that happens with these smaller events.
Yeah. And if anyone's listening or watching and you're a fan of my podcast or you're a fan of my newsletter and you're going, definitely reach out to me because I really want to, I always like meeting up with, my audience face to face. So I really am hoping to meet with several, put a face to a lot of names at this conference. The first one I went to, I did meet a few people who were like, I had one of my subscribers took me out to dinner one night. It was really cool. So I always like getting out and meeting my audience. And my hope is there's a lot of synergy between the people who read my newsletter and who will come to my conference. But
what is funny about that is that I think you introduced me to Lexi Grant. And Lexi spoke last year. Now Lexi's going to interview Justin Welsh as our pre-closing keynote, and then right after that is BJ Novak from The Office. So it should be some fun.
Awesome. Well, Joe, those were all the questions I have for you. Where can people find you online?
JoePulizzi.com, Pulizzi.com. I have my own little newsletter. You can find my podcasts. This Old Marketing is our big podcast on marketing, and all my books. Content Inc. is probably the most relevant book for this whole thing. And then, of course, CEX.events is the event coming up. Would love to see you there and meet you in person and talk to you and talk about how we're going to build your content business.
Awesome. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Simon. See you soon.